Well, I was up dancing and now I'm kind of chilling out a little bit. What a great combination of fun and music.
Very good. I've been in on some of his sessions with groups. He's very good, very good,
Yes. And
enthusiastic.
Cheryl and the amazing committee that you had going into this had been tasked with so much. Um, Sorry, I'm getting some messages about who's on and who's not. But tell us a little bit about why, when you have a conference this long, these what you call palate cleansers are so important.
We thought that having back to back to back to back sessions would not give people who were viewing time to kind of rest and reflect on what they might have already seen. And it also gives you an opportunity if you need to get up, stretch your legs, go to the bathroom, whatever, uh, get another cup of coffee. It gives you time to do that. Plus, I think the combination of having music as some of the palate cleansers, and then having the yoga, I think was also very helpful and very relaxing. But I do want to give a shout out to my committee, and I'll do that right now while we're waiting for the next committee to start. But we were tasked about 5.5 months ago to come up with a conference. It had to be online totally, and it had to be something that people could access all across the country. So we had to come up with what we were going to do, how we were going to do it, who we were going to ask to be on the panels, and all of that within that 5.5 month period. The other task for the task force was to review all of the videos that came in. We had the personal story videos as well as the infomercials, and somebody on the committee decided that all as many of the videos that came in as possible needed to be watched and reviewed by people with aphasia, because that was going to be, we wanted to make sure that they were aphasia friendly. So the members of the committee with aphasia were the workhorses basically of the whole effort, because they were the ones who were watching the videos. So that was essential. But my committee consisted of Aboye Jinkiri, Tom Boyle, Erica Boyle, Mary Beth Clark, Tammy Brandcamp, Rachel Rogers, Matthew Weingartner, Trish Hambridge, Bonnie Walter, Elise Gordon, and our youngest reviewer was Emma Lazaro. She is one of the volunteers with me over at Voices of Hope, and she just wanted to get involved. So she joined the committee as well, but it never would have happened without every last one of those people, and then some. So I just wanted to do a shout out for them. And we can move on to the, are we ready?
Almost. We are waiting
Almost.
for Becky to jump in. We have officially have this plan for 4:45, but so she should probably be jumping on any
Yes.
time. Cecelia, I could see you a little bit, but it looks like something's in front of your camera because when it shows like a little bit, almost like a screen's in front of it. But we can see you. We can see that you're there under Mary Beth, and I changed your name. See, um, yeah, you're popping on and off with the visual there, but and we certainly expect some technological challenges. But this is a super important um, presentation, and I know that there were lots of submissions. We've talked about this before, that this task force had to come up with, deciding which ones, and I'm sure it was a tremendously impossible job because so many of them were so good and people are doing amazing things. The area of primary progressive aphasia and primary apraxia of speech has just really taken off. I remember when I started the Aphasia Center here in North Carolina, a woman came with a newspaper and said, "That's what I have." Like she's trying to explain to me, "That's what I have," when she saw a definition of aphasia, but she had still not been diagnosed. And Many people share experiences of people being misdiagnosed or, diagnosed with Alzheimer's or, without really understanding the primary progressive components. And over the last like 5 to 10 years, it's just really blossomed, and it's because of amazing professionals and family members and people with PPA who are saying, listen, this is different. We were able to gather this group together as one of the presentations. I'll send Becky a quick note. I'm going to double check that she's not in the participants, but I did not see her in there in the attendees. And Cecelia, do you want to?
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can. We just can't, like, something is in front of your camera because you can see half of it sometimes, but then it's blocked. So if you could turn the camera back on, video back on.
The camera is open. I'm using a little add-on camera. Oh,
Right there is where it's open, but you have to open. Is there a shutter or?
no.
Okay, well, we
Is that
can't hear you, so that's good. No, we cannot see you. Charlotte, you can go ahead and come on in, and I'm going to send a quick note to Becky and make sure that she'll probably be jumping on right when I do that. But Mary Beth, why don't you start off by introducing like how this panel came, how difficult your job was because you took on the responsibility of this topic area, and I'll be standing by.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks, Maura. And I know that Becky should be joining us shortly. So we've heard from many caregivers and people with aphasia that they want to know more. They're hungry for more information about primary progressive aphasia. And we know that there's many people out there that have primary progressive aphasia and are living with primary progressive aphasia, for years, right? So we wanted to talk to a few of the experts. We wanted to be able to have them share their. Hi, Cecelia. We are able to see you now. Thank you.
Sorry about the glitch.
That's okay. And so as Maura mentioned, this was difficult in terms of identifying, who we should invite to talk about primary progressive aphasia or to share their experiences, because we know that so many of you have things to offer. But for today, we've asked Cecelia Zorn and Charlotte Rogers to join us. Becky Khayum, who we're waiting to have join us, is a speech language pathologist who works and has worked with people with aphasia and people with primary progressive aphasia for the past 15 years. She happens to be the president of Memory and Aphasia Care. It's a Chicago-based therapy company. And she also collaborates with the PPA researchers across the country. She is honored to co-chair for the past 4 years, actually, the primary progressive task force at the National Aphasia Association. And she has been on that task force with another individual, Kaya Shibata, who actually put together some resources for us to share with you as well. But as long as we're waiting for Becky to join us, I'd like Cecelia and Charlotte just to share a little bit about yourselves as we get started.
I'll go ahead and get started. It looks like I'm getting the wave from you, Charlotte. It's really a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. It's really an honor. I live in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and my husband Wayne was diagnosed with PPA when he was 62 years old. And we lived with his PPA for 9 years before he died 2 years ago. Actually, to be honest, I think I'm still living with PPA, and I probably will be for the rest of my life. It has affected me differently throughout Wayne's diagnosis and throughout our time together. And now as I'm living after his death.
Great.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Charlotte.
Thank you, Cecelia. I've been learning from you already in the time that we've spent together. So my name is Charlotte Rogers, and I'm a care partner to my mother, who was diagnosed with primary progressive aphasia about 4 years ago. My father is the primary caregiver, and he's doing a great job. He's really doing a lot. And I'm the secondary caregiver, kind of helping both of them out. So I live in Charlottesville, Virginia, and my parents were living in New York State. But following the diagnosis, they decided to move here to Virginia to be closer to me. So we've experienced a move. And I love getting to live closer to my parents than ever before, but it's certainly in different circumstances than it was in my childhood. So,
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Charlotte. I know that many people in our audience probably already know this, and Becky will provide much more information on this, but primary progressive aphasia is it's different. And many people who have primary progressive aphasia have different types of symptomology. They're not all the same. And I think one of the, definitely from what I've learned from caregivers of people with PPA, is that it's uniquely different in that you're not on a road where things are going to get better, or the communication is going to get better, or the cognitive skills are going to decrease and become less. It's not like that, right? So primary progressive aphasia is different in that way. One of the things that many people, I think, are wondering about is if you had to think about, if you two think back about what would be important in terms of the advice that you would give to families who are currently going through that diagnosis process, what are some of the important things or advice that you could share with individuals?
yeah, well, I can start because my family received the diagnosis relatively recently. And I can say that it really took me an entire year to adapt and really understand that the diagnosis is one that is progressive. And that it's terminal, right? So there's no existing effective treatment to reduce or reverse the symptoms, and that there's no cure. And so that is really devastating news. There's a lot of grief and anticipatory grief associated with that. So my piece of advice is to be with your family members as much as you can and to seek help. I turned to the National Aphasia Association right away. Their website had a lot of helpful information. And I also reached out to support groups in my local area. So here at the University of Virginia, we have an aphasia support group. I also joined the online NAA PPA support groups, and I joined a virtual support group in Philadelphia through the Aphasia Center. So I just want to say hi to all my support group folks who are out there, because they've really been a wonderful community for me, and it's so important to talk to people who are in the same situation.
Thank you.
Right.
Becky
Yeah.
has jumped on. I just want to make sure too,
Thank
and
you.
if somebody could put it in the chat because I'm unable to leave and put in the chat, but Charlotte, I know you probably mentioned the article and written work that you're doing, but I think it's really important to have that accessible. So if someone can drop that in the chat, that would be great. Maybe Kia could do that. I know she's listening too, but I'm gonna bow out. And now that Becky's here, I feel much better.
Oh, you're good.
Yeah, great. Hi, Becky. Oh, I'm glad I'm glad you were able to jump on. Um, so actually, Becky, I introduced you a few minutes ago. So
Oh, I'm
please,
sorry. I thought I was supposed to get on oh, so I was supposed to be on at 3:45 to actually be live and introduced. Oh, I'm
yeah,
sorry. I
no,
was thinking
no,
we were meeting before.
no, that's all, that's fine. But if you'd like to go ahead
Mhm.
and yeah, and just tell us more about you and what you're doing in terms of the PPA task force and more information that you wanted to share with everyone regarding primary progressive aphasia.
Oh, absolutely. Well, no, it's again, thank you for the opportunity to be here. And I'll just, yeah, for me, I am a speech language pathologist and I am based out of Chicago. And I have worked clinically with people and families living with PPA over the past 15 years. And I've worked also not only in the clinic, but in research in the area of speech language treatment and how we can help people living with PPA and their families with person-centered treatment to help with communication. I own a, small therapy company in the Chicago region. So I can start off by just giving a brief explanation or definition kind of PPA. And I just want to start off by saying that the vocabulary and verbiage used to describe PPA in the medical field and the research field, it is very complicated and it's difficult to understand. So for all of you here living with PPA, I know this can sound confusing, but happy to answer any other questions in the Q&A. And on the NAA website, we also have more information about PPA that you can refer to at any time. So I think the first question I always get is, will PPA turn into dementia? And really, the dementia is more of an umbrella term, and that simply means that we have cognitive deficits, such as language, that are getting worse over time and they're impacting people's daily lives. And so there are different types of dementias that are caused by something called neurodegenerative disease. And that just means we have abnormal or misfolded proteins in the brain and they're spreading over time. And so you certainly hear about different types of dementias that are caused by these abnormal proteins, such as Alzheimer's dementia. We have Lewy body dementia. And then we have frontal temporal dementias. It's kind of another umbrella term. And PPA falls under that category of frontal temporal dementia. And so that is because the language center of the brain is in the frontal temporal region. So again, that's a kind of a lot of vocabulary, but the answer is that PPA doesn't turn into dementia. PPA is a form of dementia that's caused by neurodegenerative disease. And so it's really important when people ask or you're trying to explain PPA to others that you make sure that you point them to resources and websites that are accurate that can help to explain that. Because I know there's such a stigma around the word dementia. And so I want to make sure, that people understand. the accurate information. So briefly, there are 3 different variants or subtypes of PPA. And what's important to know about these is the 3 different types of PPA come along with different symptoms. And that just means in that language center of the brain, the bad proteins can start in different places in the language center of the brain. So therefore, with the 3 different types, you have different symptoms. And so those types are non-fluent agrammatic PPA, we have semantic PPA, and logopenic PPA. And so each of those people have their strengths and their weaknesses, but I always tell people don't ever compare yourselves to others because someone who has a different type of PPA may sound very different than you, and they may be able to speak fluently, but they can't comprehend very well. Or perhaps they have a lot of difficulty forming sentences and the grammar, but comprehension and writing is really, really good. So as far as progression goes, because PPA is caused by neurodegenerative disease that spreads over time, it does get worse, and it is fatal. In terms of life expectancy, research has documented anywhere from 2 to 20 years past the start of people's symptoms. And that's something that I know is so frustrating to families, to not really know what the future looks like and how quickly this will progress and how different symptoms will appear and change over time. And I know Cecelia and Charlotte, thank you so much for being here to share just your experience, with living with PPA. But I think in terms of a cure, there is no cure. There are medications that can help relieve the symptoms, certainly helping with anxiety or depression that can be so common. But ultimately, it really is about finding the right resources to help support both, all of you living with PPA and all of you care partners and family members and friends who are here with us today. So with that, we can, I know, transition into our questions.
Sure. Thanks. Thank you so much, Becky. That was very, very helpful. One of the questions that we asked and Charlotte provided us with some information was, when you think about getting that initial diagnosis, as you think back, what was the advice, or what is the advice that you would give to families who are currently navigating that diagnosis process? And in terms of, like, what did you find as being reliable information and support? And I know Charlotte gave us her thoughts on that, but we haven't heard from Cecelia yet as to what she thinks.
Right. That's really a great place to start. I think, as I've kind of poked my nose into some support groups online, some people are very sort of frustrated with a lack of diagnosis as they navigate different departments and different specialties and different geographic areas trying to be diagnosed. So I really appreciate that. Wayne's diagnosis, our diagnosis, happened very quickly, very efficiently, and we could move on then to getting into individual speech therapy support and also aphasia community support. That was really critical. So from a neurology perspective, our visits tended to be annual for a couple of years, and then we simply pulled away from seeing neurology and stayed very, very closely connected with the speech language pathology community, both individually, as I said, and in groups. I think the most helpful thing from a kind of a like a general perspective from support, and I'd be interested to hear your comment too, Charlotte, is the combination of talking and doing in Wayne's and my connection with speech language pathology. So it wasn't just, it wasn't just sort of a social connection and talking, which was important, but it was also doing things. And Wayne was very much a doer all his life. So anything that had to do with like hands-on doing was really helpful to him and to me. So seeking out hands-on activities, whether it was walking or making pottery or singing. He was an amateur singer, so all of those activities were wonderful.
I can say that we also have found the speech language pathologists to be by far the most helpful specialists in dealing with PPA. My mom goes to see an SLP here in Charlottesville, and when she comes out of those appointments, she's all smiles and happy. And I think that's because the SLP plays a role in providing some communication strategies, certainly, but also provides emotional support and a safe space to talk about PPA as well. So I'd even say that in our support groups, we all know who the SLPs are, and they have a sort of rock star status in our community. So that's been a really positive aspect of the diagnosis for us.
Thank you for that. Just to kind of take this one step further, can you two talk about your ability to be involved in those therapy sessions or to participate in those therapy sessions?
I attended every single session with Wayne. I don't think I missed any over those, well, it turned out to be about 8 years that we were part of that. And so it really, the therapy sessions were both of ours, I think. I was paying as much attention as I could to the speech language pathologists, both individually and in groups, because they were role models for me. I would practice what they were doing. And then I realized that as Wayne and I connected with friends and family, I was probably role modeling for friends and family because it helped them know what to say and how to say it, how to use Wayne's iPad and his drawing and his circle choices and all of those strategies that then I think my friends and family felt empowered and could communicate with Wayne. And so for me, attending those sessions was just like critical.
Yeah, and I agree. Going to the sessions is wonderful. In general, it's my father who goes and accompanies my mother to those because they live together, and he's her primary communication partner. I accompany my mom to our aphasia support group with other folks who have PPA. And the most important thing I learned there is that my role as a communication partner is to slow down, to look my mom in the eye, to be in a quiet place where I give her my full attention. And then as she is searching for a word, I do not interrupt, and I do not speak for her. Instead, I can say, "Do you want help?" And sometimes she says yes, and sometimes she says no. So it's really important to respect your communication partner and let them decide for themselves when they'd like help and when they don't want help. And when they do want help, I have found that the strategy called talking around the word to be the most successful one. My mom has logopenic PPA, so she has trouble finding the right words for what she wants to say. And so I can ask, what category is it in? Is it a thing? Is it a person? Is it a place? And then little by little, we get to the word that she wants to say. So it requires a lot of patience and slowing down, which our world doesn't have a lot of right now. One person in my support group said that, in fact, the world needs more people with aphasia, not fewer, because it shows us all how to slow down. And I think that's true.
I think you bring up a really good point. Very good point, actually. And I heard something similar to that in one of the other sessions earlier, that maybe more people should have. Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. Becky, did you have a comment that you wanted to add?
Yes, absolutely. And you're so right. The many different strategies that are different for every person and every family and communication partner. I really like, Charlotte, what you said about, yeah, it's so important to ask the person living with PPA, what they're comfortable with, if they want you to join in. And I think all of the points that you made about being actively involved in the therapy is so incredibly important.
Thank you. One of the things that I'd like to ask next would be, when you think about, you both were involved or are involved in the sessions with the speech language pathologist. I know that you both have taken away strategies that seem to be very helpful with communication with your mom, or in your case, Celia, with Wayne. Would you share some of those strategies then that have been, very useful for you? Strategies that you did share with your family or good friends?
The thing that comes to mind for Wayne and for me was his use of his iPad. He was extremely comfortable with it. I mean, he was quite a techie, and so moving into using his iPad for drawing and for written word choices that someone could write, and he could then circle his choice, whether he wanted a beer or wine or a Bloody Mary or whatever, and he could circle those very easily. So he never went, I don't think he ever went anywhere without his iPad, just because that was his communication tool. And he was quite a good sketcher and could draw things that he was trying to say. So the use of his iPad for drawing and written word choices probably comes to mind as his key tool. And then inviting people, and he was very comfortable in just sharing his iPad, and someone would draw or someone would write, and then he could communicate in that way. One of the coolest things that happened, it was in the memory choir where he was singing for several years, and one of the people in the choir asked me, what is the best way for her to communicate with Wayne? And I thought, what a cool thing that was. Instead of assuming or not communicate, assuming a strategy or not communicating. And she had the wherewithal to ask about that. And what I suggested to her, and it's really a kind of another communication strategy, I think, Wayne, what we compiled was a collection of photos with Wayne and me and family and friends and so on. And initially in his PPA, he could write a caption. Then as his PPA advanced, I would write the caption, he would enter it onto the photo and so on. So it was kind of an evolutionary use. And the photos served as a point of connection with other people. So what I remember telling this person in the choir and also other people is to ask to look at his pictures. And instead of asking questions like, where were you snowshoeing? to rephrase that and say, God, it looks really cold where you were snowshoeing. So just helping people with just a little nudge about using photos to communicate with Wayne. And of course, he was beaming with all of it. And so the photos then served as a tool for communication.
Yes, I agree with Cecelia. We have also used a photo book that my mom and dad and I have been putting together. In fact, we went back and redid their wedding photo album so that they could see people who they're still friends with now, you know, all those years before. And then we also are working on a more contemporary photo album to help retain some of those names and memories of people as those fade. One place where our case is very different from Cecilia's is that technology was one of the first things to go for my mom. So she really doesn't use her cell phone. She doesn't use the Lingraphica device or an iPad very much. So we are analog, as it were. And sometimes I'm kind of jealous because I would love to not have to check my phone all the time or check my email. So that sounds nice. Although one thing I did help my mom with was to send an email to her friends and her church group, letting them know about the PPA and offering them some communication strategies in writing, letting them know that she needs a little more time to communicate and, you know, the things I mentioned before, talking slowly and giving her time to respond, not speaking for her. And I think they really appreciate knowing what to do because friends and family want to support and it's important for the care partner to offer that for them.
Your comment, Charlotte, reminded me of our Wayne's use of his aphasia card that he had, and it was in his wallet, which serves the same purpose as the email it sounds like your mom maybe sent out. And he was very comfortable using his card. He'd pull out his wallet immediately to the flight attendant on the plane or to the staff at the restaurant or to friends and so on. And the speech language pathologist helped us change the comments on that card as his progression advanced. So I think maybe over the course of those 8 or 9 years, we changed it almost every year, just tweaking it a little bit. And people would read his card and you know, it was an extremely useful on the spot sort of thing that he was very comfortable using.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. You know, in talking about, you know, the progression of the disease and some of the future symptoms that you hear about, what are some of the thoughts or the kinds of things that you've shared then with family and friends about the progression of primary progressive aphasia or the progression of the symptoms?
Would you like to begin, Charlotte?
Sure. I'll talk about that a little bit. I would say that that's one of the hardest parts to talk about. There is still a stigma about dementia, especially if there's Alzheimer's elsewhere in the family or other forms of dementia. So I've actually found that people turn to me as the daughter to ask some of those questions. And I feel empowered to answer them because I've been educated in my support groups. And I talk a lot about the importance of spending time with my mom now. And I encourage people to be with her and to know that I think the thing that I found is that my mom and I used to talk all the time, endlessly, and we used to talk fast, and we're verbal people. But our relationship has changed, and we don't need words to love each other anymore. We can just be together and drink tea while it rains, or pet the dog, or go to church and sing. And so those have made a really big difference. And I try to encourage other people to spend time with her as well, because all of us are only on this planet for a certain amount of time. So that's some of my strategies. It's really not a medical strategy. It's more of an emotional strategy. So yeah.
Right. I think that for me, the journey was maybe a little different than yours, Charlotte. Initially, when Wayne was diagnosed, I don't think I got it that this is a dementia. I don't think I understood that. And if I was told, I didn't hear it. I'm not sure that I was told. So I don't know how those first few months maybe kind of evolved around that. I do remember very early on asking the speech language pathologist in a one-to-one relationship that we had a one-to-one ongoing sessions with, would there be a time when Wayne couldn't talk? And she looked me in the eyes and in my heart and says, yes, there will be a time when Wayne will have no speech. And of course, that was devastating in a way, and we can maybe talk about grieving later, but so that was devastating to hear, but it was also empowering in that I trusted that speech language pathologist to be honest and truthful. And it just opened up a relationship where I could ask all kinds of questions and I knew she would be honest and truthful. So that was a little bumpy. And it was also bumpy with my family, because initially after the diagnosis, the discussion was Wayne is going to be losing his speech. And there was no discussion, because I don't think I knew, there was no discussion that this is a dementia and he will lose his memory and cognitive skills and all of that before he dies. And so in that process, it became, family and friends would say, well, I thought you said it was just a speech problem. And I needed to say, well, it's more than that. So I think that that evolution felt bumpy for us, I should say.
Yeah. Yeah, I really hear that, Cecelia, too, because there was a time when I wasn't sure what I knew what aphasia was, but I didn't realize how different PPA was. And so that's a very important step, I'd say. I think one of the things that our family has been able to do, that I encourage other families to do, is to start planning in the early phases of the diagnosis for what's coming later. And my mom and I are both planners, so is my dad. And so I think we were able to do things like arrange legal and financial frameworks so that that would go smoothly. We also started visiting retirement communities or care facilities while my mom can still talk and tell me what she thinks of them. Because I think eventually someday it may fall to me to make some of those decisions, to me and to my dad. And I didn't want to be left wondering what she would like or what she would think of a place. And so we tried to, even though it's very hard to go when someone doesn't need that kind of care yet, but to go to the places and tour them. And it's just so important to have a chance to hear what she thinks while she can speak. So, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Charlotte. Yeah, I can't imagine how difficult that would be. But on the other hand, I can definitely see the benefits of doing that pre-planning, right? So that your mom can be involved. Becky, I'm wondering if you've got a little bit more information or comments you'd like to share on the topics we just mentioned. And then I think we'll open things up to our audience for questions.
Yeah, certainly. I know just covering so many important topics, all the way from use of technology, which I think it was actually perfect, Cecelia and Charlotte, how different, your husband and mom are in terms of comfort level and using technology to communicate. I do find that quite a bit when I'm working with people. And so I find that as a speech language pathologist, it's so important to let the care partners know that it's okay if you use technology, but you're the one who really helps to pull out the phone or take the pictures or make the albums. And that still can be a really powerful tool. But even, or like Charlotte, you said, just making some beautiful paper, photo albums and ways to point and whatnot to help communicate that message is so important. And then also, I think just you describing that there are so many different types of communication strategies, and those will differ for every person and their care partner. Just those social, interactions, those dynamics are different. And that is where a speech language pathologist can really work with every family as symptoms change to figure out, okay, what still works? Oh, okay, maybe we need to change that a little bit. Oh, let's add in some more scripts or different things to help communicate. So, yes, I thought that was so many good points that you made there. And in terms of the progression, absolutely, I feel that for families, saying just the ambiguity of not knowing what's coming next is so hard, and not knowing what symptoms are going to arise, while acknowledging the pain of that. I also always say, we're as SLPs or other social workers and other healthcare professionals, occupational therapists, we are always here. And if a new symptom arises, it's memory loss or maybe some visual spatial difficulties, we have strategies for that. And the ultimate goal is, how can we make sure that they can participate in communication and activities that they love? And no matter what symptoms arise, it's all about how can we make sure we get different strategies in place to help with that. So yeah, so those were just a couple of thoughts to add on to that discussion.
Thank you, Becky. Cecelia and Charlotte, on behalf of the National Aphasia Association, thank you. Sincere thank you for sharing, your personal perspectives and your expertise. I think everyone really genuinely appreciated all of the information that you shared. And now, if it's all right with you, we're gonna open up though to some more questions that our audience may have on primary progressive aphasia.
Yes, thank you so much. We have gotten some questions in the chat, and appreciate Charlotte, you jumping in with some of your stats there. And Kia, who is also watching, and notes that PPAOS, which is the primary progressive apraxic speech, tends to progress a bit slower for many people. Of course, everyone is different. The other thing I'm glad you mentioned and put in there, Kia, is we have had the opportunity to have several Ask the Expert panels. There's 2 or 3 that I routinely share with people. Uh, People that have PPA that are on those panels, and then ones that are expert professionals. And so I definitely encourage you to go to our YouTube channel and look under the playlist for Ask the Experts, because I think you'll find things that would be very helpful. One of the questions really seems to be, and I'd love everybody's thoughts on this, is kind of, what if you don't know, like you don't know, right? The uncertainty of when the other shoe is going to drop. And how do you deal with that when speech therapy might be actually making improvements, right? So you're starting to see improved communication, and then, but in the back of your head that there's going to be some changes. And Betty put a great comment here about what you're saying is you really don't know when it's going to get worse again.
Yeah, just in relationship to that, our experience was sort of like plateau, drop, plateau, drop. So those shoe drops, if you will, were pretty drastic. And then we'd kind of sail along without, without, without improvement. I don't ever remember there being an improvement, but I loved the plateaus because there was some predictability and some certainty about that. And then over the course of almost a day sometimes, or a week or two, there was a drastic loss in skills.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a pattern that seemed predictable.
Yeah. Well, and I can say too that my mom really has enjoyed the Ask the Expert series that the NAA puts up on the YouTube channel. She has watched that several times because it really does help her understand what we're dealing with. And I would say also that in general, the decline has been fairly slow for us, which is great, and I'm grateful for it. I did notice that when my parents got COVID over Christmas this past year, there was a significant decrease in my mom's speech and ability to communicate. But then as she recovered from COVID, things improved. So it did sort of get back to maybe to where it was at the baseline pre-COVID. So that was our experience with that, which I was, for a little while, I was really worried that we were not going to have the bounce back. So that was a moment of light there for us, I would say. Yeah.
Becky, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, just reinforcing that the progression for everyone is so different. Certainly kind of that stair step, as you described, Cecelia. I certainly have seen people who've undergone a major surgery or have some other health condition that then impacts, right, the symptoms and perhaps the progression a bit, or just makes it more difficult to communicate because of the other things going on. So, and certainly with speech language therapy, learning different strategies, it may not feel necessarily what people have told me is though it's better, but perhaps it's just easier to get the message across with the use of a lot of different strategies. So, I think when people do have a sharp decline, that is an especially important time to reach out to your speech language pathologist, because certainly let your neurologist know as well, because we definitely want to step in and figure out, okay, let's problem solve. Let's see how we can help with these new symptoms.
That's a great segue to a question that has been asked over and over this weekend, and it's about advocacy. And one of the things that we are hearing on our side of the helpline is, and I'll give some quotes. The speech therapist told me there's nothing they can do with my husband, wife, mother, sister, because it's progressive and it's going to get worse. I'm being gentle on that one because there's been some that have been even more overtly dismissive. And I'm wondering if you guys can give advice on how to speak to the speech therapist, because it sounds like the speech therapy was a bright spot, but for many, many of our folks, that is not the experience they're having. And speech therapists, as Cheryl said so well earlier, is we're trained as generalists, right? And if you pick a specialty, you really go and get as many trainings and information as you can about that. But there wasn't even information available on PPA for years. So how do we encourage people to advocate for services and explain to them what you need from them, not what they have been trained to do or what they think the insurance company is going to say?
I'm gonna just quick jump in on this, and I know Becky is gonna have more comments, and Charlotte and Cecelia. I think you are the experts, your family members, your good friends that are living with you, you are the experts, and I think that you should, maybe interview certain people, or, go to the National Aphasia Association website and talk to people at National Aphasia Association, or talk to people in the support groups to find out who they recommend, within your area, or within the area maybe that you live. And you know what? If you go to a speech pathologist who you're thinking, okay, this person really doesn't get it, they're not able to help me, they just see, there's nothing that can be done, that isn't the person you want to be treating you. You need to go to someone who's going to help you along the journey, because there are speech pathologists out there that do understand it, and other people that have aphasia, maybe not PPA, but that have aphasia, that have started all these amazing Zoom groups, virtual groups, who are out there to help as well. And I'm sorry, Becky, Charlotte, Cecelia, I know you have more to say.
A comment that I would add, just a couple things. If one is encountering a speech language pathologist that isn't particularly helpful, asking that person to refer you to someone who might be more helpful, maybe would be a place to start. And another, the speech language pathology departments at a university level, as locally as one can access them, might also be able to serve as a resource. We have a wonderful department here locally that is extremely connected with the community and the community of speech language pathology. So they perhaps could serve as a resource, knowing SLPs locally, for example. So those are two things that came to mind.
Great ideas.
Yeah, and I found we've had success with SLPs. It's been more with neurology, where I have found that I need to be an advocate for my parents, for both of them. For my dad as the care partner who needs support and respite care, and for my mom who will have changing needs throughout the disease. And yeah, I found neurologists talk too fast. So I have to ask them to slow down so that my mom can understand what she's saying. And really just trying to train our medical system to work with aphasia, because if there's one place that has a lot of time pressure on it, it's the medical profession right now. And folks with aphasia are the ones who need more time. So that's I see that as my main advocacy goal.
Becky?
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I found that over the years, past 15 years, primary care physicians, neurologists, for any type of dementia, have definitely had a lot of reports from families like, this is really helpful. And so then they're more likely to refer. So what all of you can do is, if you're having a good experience with your speech language pathologist, go tell your doctors, spread the word, because
Tell us.
yeah, we really need them to be aware that, oh yeah, we should make that referral. And if you go to your neurologist and they say no, go to your primary care physician and say, oh, could you write a referral? I think, like I said, it's important to advocate. Regarding finding a speech language pathologist who specializes in PPA in your area, we do get this question every single PPA chat, and we are working on it, always try to put together a list. And but I think the reality is that finding a speech language pathologist close to you who not only has experience in PPA, but actually has the training and the person-centered approach to care, that can be really hard to find. So sometimes I found people telling me, well, we went to one speech language pathologist and they said that they'd worked with someone with PPA before, but we just did like a bunch of workbook pages, and then they told me insurance wasn't going to reimburse anymore. But then we went to another speech language pathologist, and they didn't have a lot of experience at PPA, but they were willing to learn. And I gave them the NAA's, resources and other important resources they learned. And most importantly, we had a good relationship. They really focused on our goals. Like, we kind of ran the session. It wasn't them saying, here's what we're doing today, let me pull out our word list. So I think my best advice would be to certainly ask others, come to the NAA. We can help as much as we can, but try to, it's completely fine to work with someone. And if it just doesn't feel like a good fit, just like any doctor, that's okay. It's completely fine to ask them for a referral or to seek out one yourself. And certainly telehealth, the last thing I'll say is a really important access to speech language pathologists that are licensed in your state in telehealth. You can connect with an expert or just someone who can provide the right type of care for you and and your family much more easily oftentimes, because it really expands that access. So
and that is currently at risk. So please pay attention to what's going on in your healthcare world, because telehealth by speech pathologists are
yeah,
is in a
as of
challenging
right now,
place right now.
Yeah, at the time of this recording, it's not covered, but there is
Working
a
on it.
permanent extension in the works that we think in 2026. If you're listening to this later on, hopefully we'll go through. So
Good point, Becky.
yes, absolutely.
All right. Well, I want to thank you all. I mean, we could talk about this forever. Mary Beth, thank you for a beautiful job in facilitating this discussion. Mary Beth all the committee was amazing, but Mary Beth probably had a big challenge because so many people submitted about PPA. So we may have to have a whole day on PPA on our 2026 speaking out, which we'll be having in-person options too. So everybody appreciates your honesty, your vulnerability, Charlotte, your work, and Cecelia, my husband still talks about your husband's, my husband talks about your husband's piano playing at the Night of Aphasia Arts 2 years ago. So that is on our website as well, or on our YouTube channel as well. So thank you all. Becky, thank you for your expertise, and Kia in the background. We truly appreciate it. If everybody wants to give their goodbyes, and then we are moving on to some
Thank you.
good stuff.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you all so very much for joining in.